What's up guys, JV2017 here with today's Destiny tips and tricks content, and this time we're covering every single type of weapon stat that can appear on the weapons in the game. I thought this would be a great idea since I'm going to start releasing more and more exotic weapon guides similar to the Bad Juju guide I released a few days ago on my channel. Now the game does provide a little description, however it doesn't cover some of the in-depth nuances that each stat actually has in the game. Now before we, jump in here, I do want to note when you're comparing things like rate of fire and impact, you can't compare things across different weapon classes and types. So for example, don't try to compare the impact of a hand cannon to the impact of an auto rifle or a sniper rifle. They're just different kinds of guns, and so try to stay in the same weapon class and compare two auto rifles when you're doing these kind of comparisons. Just my 2 cents on that. So our first little thing we're looking at is the rate of fire. Very simply, it is how quickly the weapon fires per minute. So there's not really much to say about this except the fact that higher rate of fire weapons are obviously going to have lower impact, and of course the opposite is true as well. Lower rate of fire is going to have typically higher impact. So that's really more of a feel kind of stat depending on what you think is better for your playstyle. Impact is base damage per shot, and that counts for every single kind of weapon. It's each individual pellet, if you will, and that really applies to shotguns and fusion rifles. So some big things to note with impact is that in PvP, impact plays a role. However, Bungie has this implemented multiplayer system where everyone is kind of leveled off. However, if you have a higher impact weapon than your enemy, that combined with the attack stat it just makes a huge difference if you have a higher impact in PvP. So keep that in mind. But in general, if you're comparing weapons based on their impact, let's say you have two assault rifles or auto rifles and they have the same attack. One has higher impact, one has lesser impact. You want to choose the one with higher impact. You do every time except, maybe the rate of fire is too bad. You don't like the rate of fire. In general, you will deal more damage if you have more impact. So, next up is range. This is the effective range at which you are, able to deal maximum damage, and this affects the reticle bloom. So what the reticle bloom is, everyone knows what a reticle is, right? It's the thing on the screen that you use to aim and shoot at people. And this stat, the range stat, affects how much that widens every time you shoot your weapon. So for example, if you are shooting a scout rifle and you have to pull the trigger every single time, this really affects how widely the reticle blooms. So keep in mind that each individual sight actually modifies this stat. So if you go in and you upgrade a weapon and you put on a red dot sight as compared to maybe a holographic, I'm just making up these names, they probably have different names in the game, that will affect the range as well. It'll either increase or decrease the range, so keep that in mind. Also keep in mind with range is that the minimum damage fall off, so that means with the range stat, there's a range where you deal maximum damage, we already went over that, but if you move further away from your target, you will start to see a damage fall off. The maximum fall off will be 50%. So there won't be a point where you're dealing 0% damage. It will only go down to 50%. Next up is stability, and this is simply the amount of recoil you have while ADS and hip fire as well. So recoil can be defined as, which direction your gun shoots up and how much it shoots up, but very generally that's what stability is. And if you're trying to weigh weapons, based on stability is a pretty important little stat, because I know a lot of you guys, including myself, probably go for precision shots. That's how you kill enemies quickly, and that's how you kill people quickly in the Crucible. And so I think stability is a highly underrated stat. I think it should be overrated, more rated than it is right now. Stability is a very important stat. Reload is one of those very self-explanatory stats. It's just very simply how quickly your weapon reloads. in whatever time increment you prefer. Seconds is pretty much what everyone uses, so you know how fast your weapon reloads in seconds, and the bars are kind of ambiguous. This is kind of the reason I'm doing this type of video. So now we're done with the normal kind of stats that you'll pretty much see on almost every weapon type in the game. Now let's get into some of the, you know, specialized stats. First off is charge time. So this is pretty much, it's not reload, it's pretty much rate of fire for your fusion rifle. It's how quickly the fusion rifle charges up. And something to keep in mind, this is true across all fusion rifles, is that the charge time is a direct balancing factor with the damage on your gun. If you have a shorter charge time, your impact, not damage, impact is going to be lower. So if you have a short charge time, you're able to charge very quickly. Very generally, you're gonna have a lower impact. However, if you have a longer charge time, which means the charge time stat would be lower on your screen, I know this is kind of confusing stuff, then you'll have a higher impact. So basically you have to choose between shooting really fast with low damage or shooting very slow with high damage with fusion rifles. Next up is blast radius. This is only for rocket launchers, okay, in the heavy category. And blast radius actually factors in the size and potential damage of rocket projectiles. Something to keep in mind is that each projectile actually has a fall off, a damage fall off, so it does matter exactly where your rocket lands, because if you hit somebody and they're right in the middle of your, you know, blast radius, they're going to take the most damage. However, from the epicenter going outward, it's less damage. There's a damage fall off, and again, that'll only decrease to 50%. So keep that in mind as well. The final stat we're going to look at is also exclusive to rocket launchers. It's velocity. This measures the speed at which the rocket travels. Obviously, that's, you know, the case there. It's not really any kind of mystical explanation there. However, you do want high velocity in general, you know, because it matters in PvP a lot with lag and factors like that. If you're using a rocket launcher, you want a high velocity. Otherwise, you know, that low velocity, it's going to take forever for your rocket to get there. You guys know the gist of that. Also, keep in mind that fusion rifles have a hidden velocity stat that's not explicitly explained in the game. The amount of time it takes for when you've charged your fusion rifle and you release it and the pellets to hit the target, there is actually a stat there and it's not measured. And you can actually test this yourself by just going out in the world and comparing different fusion rifles to see which one has the best velocity. Of course, this really matters when you're trying to snipe people with a fusion rifle, which I don't recommend trying to do. So anyways, guys, that was a lot of information to digest. I hope you learned something new in this video. If you did, remember to hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It's your #1 destination for Destiny content. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will talk to you next time. Peace.